Contact points. What are they? How do they work? What are all these screws? Well, the best way to find out is just take them off. I'm going to start with these screws that hold down the contact point itself. I'm going to take those off. There's the first one. Before I take it off, I'm going to show you in the back plate the two elongated slots in the back that the screws poke through. They're elongated so that it allows movement without having to loosen the bolts securing the gap on the point. Okay, that one's loose. Now let's take this one off. There we go. And so that's just going to lift right off a little post. Here's the little post. You can see the hole in this plastic structure sits right there. And so once the contact points are on the post, they pivot on the post. And they can only pivot as far as these little slots allow the screws to move. That's it. So they don't move that much. So here are the screws. Here's the contact point. Get some more light on this. There we go. And then that reveals the subplate. The subplate sits on top of this main back plate. And there are two of them in this model. My motorcycle's a 1976 Triumph Bonneville T140V. And for my model motorcycle, you've got two subplates, one for each of the point. There are 2 points, 1 point for each cylinder in the motorcycle. It's a 2-cylinder bike. Now, the subplate can move back and forth. And it's moved back and forth by this screw called a eccentric screw. Let me move it back and forth, and then I'll show you why it's called a eccentric screw. I've already loosened the 2 bracket bolts, and those are really the only 2 bolts holding the subplate down on the back plate. I'm going to move this over because it works better on a flat surface. So watch the subplate. You're going to see it move back and forth. Let me spin this around a little bit so you can maybe see it a little better. So that's the subplate moving back and forth. There's a limit to the eccentric screw's travel, the little brass screw. You may not have a brass one. Mine's a replacement because these eccentric screws are often, they often have the thread, or not the thread, but the slot in the head messed up really badly. And that's because someone in the past hasn't loosened the screws properly, or they put this eccentric screw in incorrectly, and they've tried to manhandle it and messed up the slot. So that's it. So again, it's not a whole lot of movement, but it's just enough to fine-tune your timing. After static timing, and once you strobe time it, this is how you're going to move the contact point in relation to the cam, which comes up through the middle again. So I'll take off the subplate. I'm just going to take off one of them, and you can see that there are two bracket screws that hold the little brushes on. Two of the little brushes. And I believe the main purpose of the brushes is just to lubricate the cam. I may be wrong about that. I don't know for sure, but it seems reasonable. Let's set that aside here. I'm going to have to loosen this other one just a tad. There we go. So there we go. Here's the subplate, and I'm going to pull it off. There we go. So it just comes right off. You see on the back of the subplate, you've got these two little nubs or nipples, and these two little nipples fit in these outer slots closest to the perimeter of the main backplate. Just like that. And because they're slots, once again, it allows that movement back and forth. Okay. Looks like a little washer's over here. All right, here's the eccentric screw. The eccentric screw is eccentric because it's not just one shape, one continual cylinder. It's actually two cylinders that are offset. You see this bottom part of it. This is the bottom round. And then you've got the top round or cylinder. And they're not set one in the middle of the other. You can see the top cylinder is just a little bit smaller than the bottom cylinder. And it's offset toward one corner. Let's see, I dropped it. There it is. Fortunately, it's a bright brass color, so it's easier to see. Anyway, so you can see why it's called concentric. So in the top cylinder, you've got the slot for your screwdriver. You see it's pretty wide. So you want to use a screwdriver that's got a fairly wide blade on it. Otherwise, you might mess up this soft brass. The brass is certainly softer than steel, but it's not as soft as the original screws, which are zinc, which are also a kind of a silvery color. So if you see a soft, silvery colored concentric screw that's got a messed up head, that means, you know, it's a really, really soft metal. So you can see that the bottom part of the concentric screw, which is round, actually fits into this one round hole. It's the only hole on the entire back plate where it'll fit. And you also see there's kind of two ways you could put it in. You could put it in with the bottom, well, let me see, the offset, I should say. With the offset, bring it up closer to the camera. So I've set it so the offset the top offset is closer to the rim or the perimeter of the main back plate. And that's going to allow me to turn this way and then the other way and push the subplate within its slots. If I put it this way, where you can see the offset is the top offset is toward the center of the main back plate. And when I then it's very difficult to even put this together. And then when you do, when you do, the offset is always wedged up against the inside edge of the subplate, and it won't turn very well. I'm sure a lot of these screws have been messed up because that's happened too. If you intend to keep your points, you might want to just buy several of these. And they're more expensive than your typical screw, of course, because you can see they have to be specially made. They're just not like any other screw. So anyway, putting it in, I'm going to put the offset, the top offset closest to the outer rim, and I'll do that one more time so you see it a little better. And it fits right into that hole. Then I'm going to take my subplate, I'm sort of slotted on there, and you can see that the slot kind of will fit over the top of the offset, where the top cylinder of the offset screw, but not the bottom. Here, let me just show you what I mean, because it's hard to see. So you can see this slot will fit over the top offset of the screw, but it won't fit the bottom at all. The bottom has a radius which is too large, but the top is just right. It's perfect. And that means the bottom offset should be recessed into that hole. On the back, you want to see this as flush as possible. You want to see the concentric screw flush with the bottom. And then this should slide right in. There we go. Okay, so there it goes. Now if I have it in correctly, whenever I turn the concentric screw, and I need to put it on a flat surface, otherwise I'll push the screw through a little bit. And there you go. Now you can see the subplate moving. Now the only thing I need to do is put it all back together, and again, when you put it back together, you don't want to over tighten the screws until you get it on your motorcycle. Certainly never try to tighten the concentric screw. It's not there to be tightened, it's there just to push the subplate back and forth. That's it.